Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening for the first City Council meeting of 2015. Again, thank you for being here. We appreciate your presence. We have some agenda items here that may be contentious. However, we're going to try to get through these with the minimal amount of time, and so we'll see how this goes, our first meeting of 2015. Again, thank you for being here, and with that, would you please stand with your Alamosa City Council for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Holly, would you call the roll, please? Or gentlemen, would you please start voting? Holly?
All councilors present and a quorum has been declared.
Thank you, Holly. Next up is the agenda approval. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda, Holly?
There's not.
Thank you, Holly. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, please start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. Next up is citizen comment. Your Alamosa City Council welcomes your comments. Citizens wishing to speak may obtain and complete a speaker card through the city clerk at the start of the meeting. We have a few, approximately 5 cards tonight. I will be making sure that we adhere to the 3-minute time limit. There's a 3-minute time limit for each individual, and so that will be strictly enforced this evening. Thank you. First up is Robert Webb. Mr. Webb, thank you for being here, sir. Either one.
Which one? Thank you. Gentlemen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Robert Webb. I live on Duke Street at the end of Duke Drive, and I would like to speak a little bit to the Carroll subdivision issue. I have a question for each of you. To me, this boils down to a very simple question. If you bought a boat from me today and you
Mr.
paid
Webb?
me,
Mr. Webb, I don't mean to interrupt, but there is a public hearing scheduled on the Carroll subdivision at which there will not be a 3-minute time limit, and all
my
members of
problem
the
is I have
public are
another
welcome
meeting
to speak.
tonight.
Very
And
good.
I can't stay for the whole meeting tonight, so I need to say what I need to say now, if that's okay with you.
You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. So do I get more time back? Anyway, the question is this. If I sold you a boat today and you paid everything that you owe, and I came back a month from now and asked you to pay for it again, would you? That's, to me, what this all boils down to, because where I live, I have already paid for all of the sewer, all of the street, all of the curb, and all of the water where I live. And then this proposal is asking that I do the same. I don't have a problem with paying for curb and gutter on the part of my property that will abut the new division. But there's been inconsistent information. I question the lack and clarity of that information from the beginning. The costs have fluctuated, and there was also a note that came out just prior to the general election that said, oh, by the way, we didn't include some of the costs. And that, to me, is either it was deliberate or it was not, but it was an oversight that should not have had happened. So my fear is that it may get to the point again where you're asking me to pay, first it was $11,000, then we raised a concern about how that money was being, how it was going to be assessed on a square footage basis. Then it went down to $4,000. And I found out just yesterday that my lot is now going to be assessed $11,000 again. Which is it? So my concern is I hope that I don't have to seek a temporary injunction to seek a permanent injunction, because of that lack of information. I don't know When we were first presented this idea, we were told that individual owners would have one vote. How is it then in the election that 10 of the landowners voted no and we still lost? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Next up is Don Thompson. Mr. Thompson, thank you for being here, sir. Appreciate your presence.
Mayor and council, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to make clear my concern. The email that I sent out was not because I objected in any way to showing appreciation for our city employees. My dealings with city employees, the 11 years I've lived here, have always been outstanding. I find the city employees helpful, knowledgeable, friendly. Oh, wait, council's part of it. Oh, it's supposed to be a joke. Council has always listened to me, seldom agreed, but always listened to me, and I appreciate that. I do object to the city picking winners or losers, and I, of course, especially object to choosing Walmart. To me, Walmart is not a local retailer, and not a very fair retailer. As I'd mentioned in my email to you, they pay their employees so little that a good portion of them are able to qualify for government subsidies. So in effect, you know, I know enough about business to know that I could show low prices if I had everybody paying my employees, not rather than myself, and didn't have to reflect that in the cost of my things. Anyway, Walmart I know can kill a downtown area. Walmart, being a chain, ships money out of the valley, where when you deal locally, that money circulates in the valley, and also the local businesses give Alamosa a unique look. Knowing historic tourism, those people are looking for something that's different. They're not looking for a big box retailer that they can find anywhere. One suggestion I would make, and as I say, if I made myself clear that I fully support a bonus or a holiday thank you or whatever for our employees, I'd like to suggest that we put up a sign on 6th Street where half of our US 160 traffic goes through Alamosa without seeing our historic downtown. I think there should be a sign there that says turn left at light, don't miss historic downtown Alamosa. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Next up is Diane Hagerman. Would you please stand at the podium, Mrs. Hagerman, and give us your name and address? Oh, you're going to wait for the public hearing? That's fine, thank you. Aaron Weiss, Mr. Weiss. Thank you for being here, sir. Please approach the podium and give us your name and address for the record, please.
Okay. My name is Aaron Weiss. I live at 807 2nd Street. I appreciate your time tonight. I'm not a good public speaker, but I'll speak as I can here. Good evening. I'm a citizen of Alamosa. I have a few suggestions to improve the quality of life in Alamosa. First, a swimming pool that is open to the public more than just a few hours on a few weekdays. I am aware that they have splash land during the summer, but during all the other months, the only other pool is Hooper, which is 20 miles away and takes 23 minutes to drive, which is impractical for citizens that do not have a car or have low incomes. Swimming is one of the best exercises for people's physical and emotional health. Second, a public recreation center that is located closer to the middle of the city and that has more convenient hours. It closes at 3 p.m. on Saturday and is closed on Sunday, making it hard for working citizens to attend. Third, it would be nice to see some teachers and community leaders present some practical and educational talks at the library. This will help citizens be more engaged, responsible, educated, and hopeful for their futures and also possibly their careers. Furthermore, if the library has more updated and newer books, citizens could be better educated and productive. Last, from my observation, many people do not follow the leash laws in Cole Park and near the river. It would be nice to see this law more strictly enforced so citizens could walk and exercise and enjoy the park. In spite of big signs and warnings, this law does not seem to be followed. I think if these suggestions were implemented, less money would be spent for mental health programs, drug abuse, and public safety. Last Saturday, Milagros Coffee hosted an open mic from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., but for some reason it was canceled. If we support these types of community activities, more citizens will be more happy and healthy. I enjoyed the public concerts in Cole Park this summer with the music, and it will be nice to see these types of activities continue. Thank you for your attention and giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Next up, we have Ruthie Brown. Ruthie, thank you for being here.
I should ask Mr. Weiss if he'd give me his 46 seconds that he didn't use, but maybe I won't need them. It's kind of weird looking at that time thing here. I better get after it. Ruthie Brown, my husband and I own the Green Spot Garden Center and Antique Store at 711 State Avenue. Let me start by saying I'm talking about the gift cards, obviously, the bonus, the thank you, the appreciation, the thank you for all your work for 12 months a year in the cold and snow and wind and heat and all that. But I know that no one did anything wrong intentionally. I know that. But as a small business person who's broke most of the time, when I heard that the city of Alamosa gave their employees $20 for whatever you want to call it, I just thought that was an insult. And I'm one of the businesses that pay the taxes, that pay that bonus, appreciation, thank you, whatever. You know, I've talked to a lot of people, whether it's government employees shouldn't get bonuses, whether, you know, if they want a bonus, let them work in the private sector. But I appreciate my city workers. And I think they deserve more. I think I've said that before. I don't like the pay scale. I think these guys are the cream of the crop and they do the most for us. I don't care what you call it. If I'm not wrong, and I could be wrong, a few years ago, city employees got a $500 bonus and a 5% increase. Now, I don't know how many years ago that was, but it's from one of your employees. So I'm like, we've gone from 500 to 20. Maybe their pay scale hasn't improved that much, but I can't imagine that. And Walmart. For every business that works downtown, and many of us work 7 days a week, and we try and do our best, and sometimes we do have prices that are higher, but we're the ones that support the local nonprofits and charity, and we volunteer in our community and that sort of thing. So going to Walmart because it was easy is no excuse, and I'm saddened by that more than anything. Walmart didn't miss that $1,800 or whatever it was, but or Carlucci's or the Brew Pub or the Bistro, they do. Atencio's Market, if you're going to do a turkey giveaway, Atencio's, hams. It saddened me, and it made me feel like, what the heck am I doing in Alamosa? And it's part of the problem that coming from the top, city offices, city council, that we have not built more pride in our town to shop local. And I apologize, I only have 4 bags left, but maybe you all have these already because you shopped local during that weekend. But
Thank you, Ruth.
I don't want to get shocked. That's what I hear
appreciate
happens
it.
here. So
Thank you. Next but not least is Mr. Romero. Mr. Romero, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Please give us your name and address for the record, please.
Mr. Mayor, Council.
I like your hat, by the way.
Ms. Brooks, Frankie J. Romero, 1014 State Avenue. It's never too late to say thank you, and I'm here to thank Council on the appreciation certificate that you presented to my folks at their volunteer dinner. A special thanks to Mayor Pro Tem Mr. Grego, Councilman Vigil, and Councilman Stefano for showing up. They appreciate it. They couldn't be here tonight, but you were all invited. I understand you had other commitments and stuff, but once again, on behalf of my folks, I would like to thank you all very much.
You're welcome, Mr. Romero, and thank you. Next, we have follow-up. Does staff see any issues they'd like to follow up on? Heather?
I know normally we don't necessarily follow up on the council, on the citizen comments. I'll hold back on any discussions regarding the SID, and that staff will have a little bit more of a presentation when that public hearing's opened up, and there'll be some public comment, and I imagine some questions and some back and forth discussion at that point. In regards to the gift cards, you know, it's something where, you know, I obviously appreciate Ruthie's comment in regards to no one's necessarily to blame. I think it's a situation where we were trying to say thank you to employees. It's something that has existed for many years through different types of formats. And it was something that when I came, I thought was a little bit different. With my background in public management, it's been the top priorities for using public funds has been looking at the market for comparable pay for your positions, looking at the performance of employees and how to reward different behaviors, and then looking at the service years of employees. So if someone's worked here 5 years, a certain recognition, 10 years, a certain recognition, and so on. Those are usually the top priorities. Depending on your background, would be a question of, do you just give gift cards or other types of rewards across the board that's not based on performance, not based on years of service or anything like that. It's obviously very legal, it's ethical to do, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just a little different than what I was used to. So when it became a program that potentially was going to create controversy, and Ruthie was clear, and Mr. Thompson as well, in their comments, that it wasn't so much a question of should employees be getting it, but where was it going? And that distinction is important. But when it was something that was going to become controversial from a city perspective, I don't want us handling cash. That's a little bit more of a dangerous area where you can have some liability issues. And there's not necessarily a simple solution if there's not a central gift carding type thing for the downtown like some of the other communities may have. So we didn't knowingly provide funds to Walmart and not and say we don't want people shopping downtown. It wasn't a knowing thing, but I can understand Ruthie's disappointment. Obviously, if it's something that council wants to continue to promote the thank you on an annual basis to employees, what I'd recommend is just we can create a code, and the second pay period in November, we can put $20 on the paycheck. We're not handling cash. We're not having to get involved with where they're spending the funds, and it could be a more straightforward item. So if that's something council wants to discuss tonight or at a future meeting, we can always schedule that on an agenda as well. So.
Thank you, Heather, and I think it's probably something that council would probably like to discuss at a future date when we've had some time to think about some of the options. Maybe staff could present us with some of the options available out there.
And we have plenty of time, since we've just done November, we just did it, so we have plenty of time to talk about it.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson? Oh, sorry. Councilor Graham?
Thank you. If I can make a couple comments. I did have an opportunity to speak to Mrs. Brown and kind of give her a little history on how this thing was put together. And it has been going on for at least 30 years that I've been here. And what it was just it was a lot larger than $20 back then. And what it was on top of your whatever pay increase or whatever you got, some other merit increases, this was a little thank you, buy a turkey or buy something. And what we used to do is we rotated these. One year they would go to a Walmart, next year to go to City Market, Safeway, and kind of rotate that. And it was mostly for a turkey, you know. And so I was trying to explain that to her, and she does have a good idea where if you want to give a X number amount of money, and if they want to go to her place or to buy gas or whatever, they have that opportunity to do that. So I am totally, Heather, I appreciate that the last comment you made that we should continue. I think we should continue this because it is a small, very small token of appreciation for all of our employees, and they work hard. They're the ones that run this city. You know, we make policy. They're the ones that actually run this city. So I think it's something that we should, Mary, like you said, we should discuss and continue, maybe continue something along what Heather had said. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Grego. Councilor Johnson?
And reiterate what Charlie said, I think it's a good program. I like that program, but, you know, we don't need a bunch of controversy over a $20 certificate. The thing that I would like to kind of clarify or get clarified is there's a big difference between a $500 bonus and a $20 bonus. I've never heard a bonus that drastic or that big. I haven't been on council forever, but not even close. But if there has been $500 bonuses given and they were dropped to $20, I would like to know history on that. And I don't need to know tonight, just a little bit of background on that sort of stuff, because that's a huge separation. And I just don't know if that even happened or how it worked back then and if it's even legal now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Gillespie?
Yes, the 12 years that I've been on council, it's always been no more than a turkey or $20. That was rotated through City Market, Safeway, and now I guess Walmart. But I'm sorry to see that the program may possibly be discontinued because it really was just a token of appreciation for our employees, and I hope that continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gillespie. Do we, you said there might be a legal opinion on that. Does Eric have a legal opinion? It's legal for us to include $20 in the paycheck as a kind of like an appreciation?
It is certainly legal to do that.
Thank you.
The only time you can run into bumps is if you're actually giving a gift card that's valued $50 or above, I believe, because then you have a taxing situation. But if it's something that's being run through the paychecks, then it's being taxed anyways. So, but as far as the legal question of can you do it or not, Eric's obviously correct that it is legal and it's ethical as well.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Heather. And I'm inclined to agree with the councilors that have spoken. I've been on council since the mid-'90s as well, and I remember large bonuses that were basically done away with because of the issue of taxation and some of the legalities that were involved. However, a small token of appreciation, $20 increase in your paycheck, I think is wonderful. That way you can spend it just about anywhere you want. 9 times out of 10, they're going to go to Walmart to do it and keep the sales tax local. However, they have that option, whatever option they. So I think it's something that we should probably discuss a little bit further as we go along and encourage staff to, continue that. All right. Thank you, Council. Are there any other follow-ups, or no? We're going to just move on. We don't have any ceremonial items tonight. Consent calendar A, we have 2 issues. The consent calendar allows multiple actions with one motion. Consent calendar A contains routine items which have been recommended for action by staff or advisory boards. Council may remove a consent calendar item for separate consideration. Tonight we have the adoption of the annual resolution designating the official posting location for public meeting notices, and the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting for December the 17th, 2014. Council, do we have any comments?
Mr. Mayor, if there's no questions, I move that we approve a consent calendar A as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on consent calendar A? Seeing none, please start voting. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
We'll move on to regular business brought forward by city staff. Tonight we have Public Works that will be presenting on the public hearing on construction of improvements in the Carroll Subdivision Number 2 Special Improvement District, ordinance number 2015-1, and an annexation petition for the Tucker-Wagner annexation. Is this Pat, or is this our attorney?
Mr. Mayor, I'll introduce that. Pat is obviously here and may respond to questions or issues that come up. But
Thank you.
Before you open the public hearing, let me just give a little bit of background for the public and for the council. This has been in front of council numerous times in different phases of this special improvement district. And last year, council created the district, and the purpose of that district was for the installation of street, sidewalk, curb and gutter, lighting, water, sanitary, and storm sewer improvements in that portion of Carroll Subdivision Number 2, where they were missing. It's about, as you recall, a 32-lot portion of that subdivision addition. Part and parcel of the creation of that district was the recognition that no improvements, no funding for any of the contemplated improvements could happen until a bond election was approved by the electors of that district. So after the district was created, the Public Works staff began estimating the amount and types and cost of the contemplated improvements so that we would have the parameters to be able to present as a question for the bond election. In the November election, that question was presented to the electors of the district, and it was only the electors of the district that got to vote. So each owner of a lot had the right to vote on that question. I have the returns for that election, because I didn't remember them, but the ballot issue passed by a vote of 13 votes in favor and 6 votes against. So roughly twice as many in favor as against. That brings us to this point where we are now. And just a brief outline of that's where we are up to this point. Let me just tell you where we're going after this point and at this point. So this point is a public hearing on the construction of the contemplated public improvements, and those are set forth in a proposed preliminary order, which orders the type, kind, and rough amounts of the improvements. And part of the purpose of the public hearing is to get comment on those improvements. Are they appropriate? Is it the right kind and type of improvements that we're looking for in the special improvement district? The preliminary order has as a major component of it the engagement of a design firm. So it's just a preliminary order. It's not a final design. It certainly isn't plans and specifications that you could put out to bid. So there will be a design firm that will design the improvements and come up with plans and specifications that can be bid upon. So there have been, throughout this process, a number of estimates made of projections for costs for the improvements for the district. And those are just that, they're estimates and projections. Once the design specifications are in, there should be a little bit better handle on that. And once the designs have gone out to bid, then we actually know what the cost is going to be. So after the bids are opened and the construction is awarded, the construction will proceed, at the end of which the issue of assessing those costs against the various lots will again come before council, and that'll be in the form of an assessment ordinance. So right now, there are materials that you have in front of you in the packet that estimate what a proposed cost or what the cost per lot would be on a per unit basis and a per square foot basis. Those are estimates. There is a maximum charge that could possibly happen because the bond issue, as presented to the voters, contained a maximum amount for issuance of the bonds. That doesn't mean that that will be the price. We don't know what the price will be until after the construction is finished and then the assessment roll is done. We do know that it won't be any more than the amount that was approved by the voters. And so the estimates that you see in the materials are directed to that maximum. That's the maximum amount that that would be. And what it will be will come before you after construction is completed in the assessment roll. The estimates, or let me back up. Back when the SID was initially proposed, one of the issues that came up in public comment at that point was the fact that some of the lots in the subdivision already have some of these improvements. Some of the lots already have access to water and sewer. Some of the lots already have at least one front street to have access to the lot. And council took that into consideration, and in the estimates directed Public Works to not include an assessment against lots that already had certain improvements such as water or sewer for those particular improvements. And so when you look at the estimate for a per lot cost, those costs are back out of any lot that already has those kinds of services. That is not a final. That's a working number. Everything in terms of costs and assessments and projected costs is a working number that we're working with in good faith up until the time that we know what the actual costs are. And in fact, at the during the process of the assessment ordinance, where those costs will be assessed in relation to each individual lot, that question may well be revisited. But certainly council has already indicated its preference and its probable action with respect to not assessing improvements that already existed against those lots. So that's where we sit. And with that, if the council has any questions, that's fine. If you want to open it to public comment, Heather has something to say.
So I just want to, on the part that Eric touched on in regards to where we are tonight, part of that was a requirement to give notice to those property owners of this hearing and to send certain documents. One of those documents was a breakdown of our expected estimated construction costs. So the total construction costs that we're estimating at this time. My impression is that since that was a requirement for us to send to every lot, for those who were under the impression they would not be charged for water, would not be charged for sewer, it created some confusion because they were seeing numbers related to how much water was going to cost and those types of improvements. That was simply all the costs that are getting tied into the project, and it was a requirement to send out. As Eric alluded to, we've already followed council's direction in that when we look at pointing those costs, if they already had water and sewer, they are not receiving any portion of those costs. So I do think there's maybe a little bit of confusion when some of those people who already have water and sewer received something that was talking about cost for those types of services, but wanted to make sure that was clear as well.
Thank you, Heather. Council, do we have questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Seeing none.
I've got a question.
Councilor
Question.
Gillespie.
Yes. So design costs and construction staking, what is that? Construction staking? 3%.
I'm not sure what you're reading off of, but I'll defer that question to Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Certainly. Good evening, Council. The construction staking is an estimate for the construction surveying that'll be required for the job, the grade setting for the sewer, grades for curb and gutter, hard locations, things like that.
Okay. I think one thing that would have been helpful is, there's a column here that shows percent of the construction for each homeowner or partial. I think it would have been more beneficial if that had been a price instead of a percentage of the total cost.
I'm not sure what you're looking at now.
We have the spreadsheet up there.
There it is.
I don't know if you can read it.
There it is.
But there's, for each partial, it shows percent of total construction cost, and then it gives a percentage. I think it would have been helpful if that showed a actual dollar amount,
Their dollar amount is on the far right-hand side of the spreadsheet,
the total.
the total, yes,
But that's after finance fees.
yes. We have another spreadsheet that just shows the lot cost for construction.
Right, and I think that would have been helpful, because the majority of these costs for homeowners that already have utilities is in the finance.
Much of them are, yes.
Yes, and I'm not sure that's a fair way to assess the finance fees, is across the board. Maybe it should have been by a percentage of the total cost of the project.
Okay. We can discuss that.
That's my concern.
This is the way it was decided a long time.
Well, and again, the purpose of where we are right now is not to do an assessment roll ordinance.
Can we change these assessments in the assessment?
Yes, this
process?
is not an assessment
Okay.
ordinance. So this
Okay.
is.
So there's still time for that.
That's right. This is really more of an estimate about what the total costs are. But just to be very clear, the breakdowns per lot are purely informational at this point.
I understand
So you
that.
are not approving anything as far as that goes.
But this would show a maximum cost for each partial before finance charges. And I think that would be beneficial for each of the lot owners.
Okay, well, if anybody wants, I actually Pat brought for me a copy of the spreadsheet that he's talking about, and we
This
can
is-
print
yeah.
off any number of those, but,
And it's a spreadsheet we handed out to the public hearing, which I know not everyone was able to attend the public hearing, but the spreadsheet that I have up there right now gives just the construction costs without the financing. And that's also where you can see that if they, for example, if you look at the green for sewer, if they're already served or if they're not. So right now, the top ones don't have sewer, so they're receiving an installation cost. If they already had it, there would be a zero in that. So if they did not receive that through the public hearing or meeting with Pat and I, because we did meet with some property owners, they can contact us and we can email this or print out a copy. But this is the one where those who are concerned about they already have sewer, they already have water, very clearly shows if they're being charged for it or not.
Yes, and I think that's more in line with what they were given for original information, and would show them that these costs have not exacerbated like they show in the end. That's finance
The
charges.
legal requirement was we had to show those total costs, which then folds in the finance, folds in legal costs, and breaks it out for their payment schedule. That's what we were required to legally provide.
But the actual construction cost would be beneficial, I think.
Yeah.
Well, maximum. We have a maximum amount for the project, and if they're given 2% of the maximum amount, they can see what that actual cost is. And it may be less than that, but that's the maximum, correct? That would be the maximum.
right, the maximum is 600, I think it's 650,000.
Yes.
With a total repayment cost. And again, these are assumptions because we don't know what the interest rate will be
I
at
understand.
the time that the bonds are issued, but a total repayment cost maximum of 984,000.
And if my cost was 2% of that, then I could see what my actual construction cost was, maximum.
You could see what your actual repayment cost was, right? Your construction cost is not related to those, I mean, it's related to those figures, but it's not those figures. Your
Before
construction
finance.
costs are lower, right, before finance.
I understand that,
Okay.
yes. I think that's a lot of the problem with some of the people here is they don't see, they're looking at the in total here, and that's a much larger figure than they were quoted in the beginning for the construction.
I think there was 3 phases when it comes to pricing. We had the very, very initial phase where it was very preliminary information and it was very low numbers. I think the first thing we had is when we really scoped out the project, looked at what materials probably going to be required, we saw an increase in what we thought the project cost was going to be. Then the next one is then once we added in the financing and the legal costs, so we kind of got where the construction was starting to level out and stay where it needed to be, but then the financing and the legal part come into it, and that feels like another increase as well.
Thank you, Councilor Gillespie. And so with that, I will open the public hearing on construction of improvements in Carroll Subdivision Number 2 Special Improvement District. Is there anyone here that wants to speak for, against, or just analyze the construction of improvements in the Carroll Subdivision Number 2? Please come to the podium. Mr. McCann?
Dan McCann, 1809 Sunset, Alamosa, Colorado. I've been coming to city council meetings quite a while. This appears to be a very open process, but on the voting, what did it come up? 13 for and 6 no. Those of you who voted against, this is a legal thing we have here, and I know you didn't want it. You voted against it, but that's how things work in this country. It's called democracy. One thing about it, if you do sell your property, you'll get more for it. And I've been part of financial markets most of my life. If you're going to get any bonds now, boy, this is the time to get them, so your interest rates aren't going to be that high, even if it takes a while to finally finish this thing. And I guarantee you something. This thing will be finished a lot quicker than this college across the street from my house. I've been eating diesel fumes and dust for years. As a matter of fact, I checked it up in the encyclopedia. They built the Golden Gate Bridge quicker than they did the job across the street from my house. So they're going to finish this thing up pretty quick.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Thank you, sir. Please give us your name and address.
Again, Robert Webb, 916 Duke Drive. I appreciate Councilman Gillespie's comments because he captured exactly what the concern is. It's the lack of clarity from the beginning on where the potential cost might even be. I'm going to sell you a car tomorrow for $25,000, and 2 years from now I'm going to charge you an additional $25,000 for it. Bass-ackwards, in my opinion. I deal with construction. I am the superintendent of Monte Vista School Districts, just went through a $34 million construction project, so I understand bonds and I understand the process, and the lack of clarity from this is what is primarily the concern. And I would also hope that the council would ask for an examination of the lot owners. I count the number of people on that very spreadsheet. There's 13 different names of owners, not, was it 20, 21? And so if somebody deeded land or a lot after this project was initiated, I would wonder why those numbers are different than the names that are listed on here as actual lot owners, okay? And so for my understanding, are you saying then that at the end of the construction, we're going to be assessed? We'll know what the dollar value will be, whether it comes from the original $11,000 down to $4,000 and now back to $11,000 again. That's the confusion, because my own opinion is I cannot budget. To the gentleman who just spoke about democracy, I understand that, but I also know that as the property is value increases with this construction, I'll pay more taxes again on the bond or the election and on the property taxes. So for me, it's a triple indemnity. I've already paid on my street, and I appreciate having a little bit of space behind my house where it is now. I can see the river, I can walk to the river, I get deer that come into my yard, and it's a nice area to be. Part of the reason why I bought that particular area was so that I can look at the Sangre de Cristo Mountains and enjoy that view without wondering if there's going to be a 2-story apartment right behind my house that will, if that happens, then I will be moving back to Monte Vista. But the idea of whether or not we can know prior to the actual implementation or construction, I can't budget what I don't know. And if it's a difference between $11,000 and $4,000, that's huge, especially for people, my neighbors who are on fixed incomes. I couldn't imagine why they would want to stay there and not be able to plan their future. But again, if there can be some clarity presented tonight about that actual, is it going to be the maximum $11,000 regardless of the bond rates? And or when do you foresee that taking place, the construction schedule and those kinds of things? So again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Mrs. Hagerman?
I'm Diana Hagerman, and I'm on 919 Duke Street. Normally, I should have only been charged for curb and gutter. My house is on Duke Street in an established and completed populated area, and the Briarwood Road does not even run through my property, but is adjacent on the north side. Again, it's on the street, and it seems I'm going to be forced to pay for bond fees, engineering costs, fire hydrants, and street lights that don't even apply to me. I bought my house 9 years ago. I paid for water, sewer, electric, gas connections at my house on Duke Street. There is also a fire hydrant on my property line and a street light on my block. The Duke Street is also paved. So the city said I have paid for my home initially. I am also one of those people who are on a fixed income. Now, interest rates haven't gone up, but the fees all of a sudden have doubled. You've started included things like engineering fees and whatever for that development, which isn't part of where I live. And I feel it's really illegal to double indemnity for this. I really would like a detailed line-by-line breakdown for this charge you're giving me. And I'd like it to be accurate in case it needs to go to legal means. I should only be charged for curb and gutter, and you want to charge me for a half a road, but now it's bonds, legal fees, insurance fees for the development which my house is not a part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagerman. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the construction and improvements in the Carroll subdivision, number 2 SID? Mr. Hensley.
Hello, my name is Mark Hensley. I live at 713 Douglas Drive in Alamosa. I own lots 7 and 8 on what would be Briarwood. And that's directly north of both of these two, Mrs. Hagerman and Mr. Webb. And we've had our lots for 5 or 6 years at least, and we've always planned on building a house on those lots. I think they've got some great concerns, and I would like to see those concerns addressed also, but I am in a big favor of putting this subdivision in. I think at all the meetings that we've had, we've talked about all the items that they've brought up, and we said exactly what everyone else has already shared. Is they already have some amenities. Their price will go up when they get some of those things, but they should not bear the burden of things that they've already got in place. So, and I don't think that anybody's expecting them to pay more than their share. And I know we've talked about that at least 2 other meetings. So I'm glad that you've given all of us a chance to talk. But I think if we move forward with this, it's going to be a good thing for the community as far as a contracting situation. It's going to open up a bunch more lots to build more houses on, which is going to give the people of Alamosa a lot more opportunity. So I appreciate the opportunity to get up here and be able to speak. And for you listening to all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Mr. Porter.
Preston Porter for Shadowwood Place. I'm here to speak in favor of this ordinance passing. I'll be brief. I feel like the process has been very open, transparent, somewhat confusing. I mean, there are a lot of numbers to digest, but when we look at the maximum dollar amount, look at the construction time frame, and when these improvements will be assessed, it should give plenty of time for budgeting purposes. We're talking about, if you want to talk about $12,000 for a cost of one lot for an improvement, that'd be assessed over 10 years. Divide that by 10, and $1,200 is $100 a month. Those are really rough numbers, but there's also an opportunity to pay those, just the construction costs, if you don't want to finance it through the bond and pay it off early. So I think this is a necessary issue, and I appreciate that council and the current city staff have tackled what has been an old problem for this particular subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Is there anyone else? Mr. Van Ryn.
Seems like I've spent a lot of time at city council over the last year. Address is 414 West Pine, and now I'm currently living at Creed at the moment. I thought the process was pretty open. The city has done an awful lot of work, and particularly Pat, in getting the stuff done. I'm sure there's some questions about clarity. After listening to it, I sure have some appreciation for it. But right from the very get-go on this thing, we always talked about those who already had property would be allowed an allowance to reduce theirs, and it would be assumed, you know, because they're already getting the water and the sewer. The curb and the gutter and all that kind of stuff would be assessed to them. But even, I think, if I remember right, the formula on that was even adjusted down. I'm not clear on that, perhaps myself, but they're not being charged for something they're not getting. And that's always been that way. I'm looking forward to getting this done. We desperately need to get it done, and if it doesn't get done now, any other time we try, it's going to even be more expensive. Right now, fuel costs are down, so hopefully that'll be reflected in the bidding process, because a good deal of what we're doing there is fuel intensive. Interest rates are down. I don't expect them to stay down that terribly much longer if you listen to what the markets are saying. So I think now is an opportune time for us to get it done. But I think when it comes right to it, the assessment was going to be adjusted fairly for everybody, and there's a certain amount of nebulousness in the number on what the cost is, but we know it's not going to exceed that price. And it could very well be down, in which case then everybody will have a lower bill than they expected. Hopefully it goes that way, but we know it won't go any higher. That's all I have to say. And I appreciate all the effort that particularly the staff has done to help us get this so we can get it developed, to get homes built. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Ryn. Is there anyone else in the audience willing to come forward and visit with us about the construction of improvements in the Carroll subdivision? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion, or?
Just before you do that, I wanted to just refocus and find out whether there was any comment specifically. We've heard a lot of comment that I would characterize as addressed toward the proper way to do an assessment, which again is not really before us tonight. What I didn't hear, and maybe nobody has any comment about it, but I just wanted to make sure that anybody who did had the chance would be the appropriateness of the particular types or kinds of improvements themselves. Does anybody think we don't need streetlights? Does anybody think we don't need curb and gutter, that kind of thing? So just to make sure that the opportunity for that kind of comment has been exhausted.
Okay. Well, public hearing will remain open until, does anyone have a question about that?
Since you need to have it recorded, I'm making the assumption from the get-go when we started all of this that we're doing this to the standards that the city has established for the town. That's the only thing I'm going off of. Do we need streetlights? Probably don't. But I think we have a standard in the city that says we want to have streetlights, and so that kind of thing is there. When it comes to water and sewer, there are no variables. We have to have those. So as far as I know, everything that's been done has been done in the direction of what we expect and the city expects if we're going to do a street. So if that addresses, Eric, your concern, that's how it's been done.
Thank you, Mr. Van Ryn. And so with that, I will close the public hearing on this and bring it back to council for discussion or questions before we move on to the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I'd
Sir.
submit that questions and comments would probably be just as well done in the context of the ordinance, which contemplates the actual preliminary order, gives some structure to those kinds of questions and comments. This, and I should have made this clear as well. This process involves two public hearings relating to this particular issue. The statute requires a public hearing prior to the ordering of any improvements. That's the public hearing that we have just had tonight. Completely separate requirement arising out of the city charter is that anytime an ordinance is considered, it's considered twice, once on first reading and second on a public hearing. It just so happens that the ordinance that's in front of you for first reading tonight concerns exactly this topic. There will be a public hearing on this ordinance, so concerning this topic again, at the following meeting.
Thank you, Eric.
I have a question for Eric. Would you please explain the voting process, that how a husband and wife for an individual property can, they get 2 votes essentially?
The way that the eligibility to vote in this election is determined is that anybody who is either an owner of property within the Special Improvement District can vote, or anybody who is a resident of the Special Improvement District can vote. So if you have property owned by one or 2 or more people, each of those owners gets a vote. If you have property that's leased out to somebody who is not an owner, but they reside in the district, then that person gets a vote. So those were the people eligible to vote pursuant to statute.
As far as the property owners, they did have to be registered within the state of Colorado, was the only other caveat related to that. And so as Eric described, if it's a husband and wife that are both listed on the deed or ownership of property, they each got a vote. And I don't think anyone's been confused on this, but it wasn't per lot that they owned. So if someone owned multiple lots, they didn't get multiple votes. It was just the one vote that they would get, but it depended on what the property was held under as far as the legal ownership.
Little follow-up on that.
Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Little follow-up on that. The city didn't set the standard for who got to vote. That is by state statute.
The only role the city had in determining who gets to vote was the city could have submitted this question to the entire city electorate, or it could submit it only to the electorate within the Special Improvement District. So the city made that decision to submit it only to the electors within the Special Improvement District, but once that decision's made, state statute describes who gets to vote.
Thank you, Council, and Councilor Grego?
Thank you. I kind of missed, you said we weren't able to make comments of what type because of this ordinance? I thought maybe I caught something different there.
You're allowed to make whatever comments you want.
Right,
I just wanted to make sure that anybody participating in the public hearing, if they had something to say about the kinds of improvements being considered, this would be the time to make that.
Maybe that's where I misunderstood you then. Because I had an opportunity to visit with at least 3 or 4 people from that area. They called me and I just wanted to share some of their comments that they talked, they were talking about. A lot of them were really confused in it, and they felt that they were railroaded into this whole process. And I appreciate the fact that you explained how the voting, how you were able to get the numbers of who were voted and all that. Another thing too, how many meetings did you have on these? Was there a lot of meetings on this? Because from what I'm hearing from these people, there wasn't enough clarity, like with the gentleman that spoke earlier. on in the different meetings and stuff, and they were totally confused on what was really going on.
We, in addition to the council decisions, where obviously those were public meetings and publicized, we had 2 dedicated public meetings just for the purposes of discussing the SID. And the second one was in relation to what kind of has created some concern in that when we realized that the electrical service was not going to be handled as anticipated, we wanted to make sure that the residents knew prior to the vote that that was going to be different. I think the impression that had been given before was that there would not be a cost assessed by the company for that, and with the different information we had, we wanted to make sure that before people voted, they understood that there could be some costs associated with the electric. So there was 2 meetings in which we covered the information. The other part is, as part of those meetings, I don't know if we just reached information overload and that's what's creating some of the confusion, or if you're not able to attend the public hearing, you're having to go off just what was in the mail and delivered to you, and it needs more of an explanation because of the complexity. But there are different spreadsheets that are floating around. You have a spreadsheet that does just the construction cost, which is the one that shows if they're going to get charged for sewer or not, water, and what those costs are. Then you've got a spreadsheet that takes that and then applies the legal and the financial for the anticipated total. And then we had to do a different spreadsheet that broke out the materials for the construction and showed those costs from a legal perspective. So there are some different spreadsheets. So in an effort to try to make sure people understood what this project included, it could be if you weren't able to attend a public hearing or because it's a complex issue, that there could be confusion. The numbers as far as from going from 4 to 11, it could be as simple as he's looking at one spreadsheet that has just the construction, and the 11 is the financing side of it when you add that into it. So, but I know you have some additional questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify the fact that everybody had this material, had ample time to get this material and present it to them, and if they chose, they could call City Hall and get this, because that's not what I'm getting from out there. They're saying that that's why they feel that they were like railroaded into this whole deal. Another area, they feel that, and I try to show it on some of the spreadsheet that Pat gave me earlier today, where they don't have to pay for some of this stuff. But they're still concerned of why do they have to pay for designs of other sewer and other stuff, you know. And I appreciate Councilor Gillespie pointing out the fact that maybe that shouldn't be a across-the-board type of thing, you know, because why redesign something that was already designed and it's already in place? And that's one of the biggest concerns.
And so I think, you know, what Pat alluded to is we were working off the spreadsheets and the discussions that we had in those meetings with council, but we also didn't necessarily dig down deep into all those details. So what Eric refers to is when it comes time to set the assessment, council can give direction to say, we want only those design costs associated with the streets apportioned to those properties that's the only benefit for. And you could give direction. I don't know how much we can break out some of that design, but to the extent that we can, and identify what design was for street, what design was for storm water, sewer, those types of things. Council at the assessment point of the process can give direction to further break that stuff out.
Another thing too, and it was mentioned earlier also, there's a lot of people, well, that live on fixed incomes here. A lot of these people have paid for their houses, so now a lien is going to be thrown right back on their houses to get this stuff paid, and that was a real major concern on some of the elderly people that live out there that own properties. And I just wanted to bring those, you know, to make sure there was clarification that these meetings were being held and they had the right to attend them, and I see the information and it flowed from us, and a lot of us didn't attend some of those meetings because they were in your ward, so we didn't feel it, you know, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified, Mayor. Thank you.
Well, and
Counselor Johnson?
Charlie, this reminds me, something that Eric wanted to make sure that from a staff perspective was always clear was that from a city and a staff perspective, it's not our role to either advocate or to not support the SID. Our role the entire time was to make sure that the information was getting out there and that when they did vote on it, they had as much information in order to make an educated guess. And so when we found out, for example, the electric information, that's why we wanted to make sure and get that out to the people. So we held the public hearings, we had the discussions in front of council. This is the material that's been attached during those discussions with city council. And I know from a staff perspective, we've met with certain individuals that had concerns. They would come in, we'd go over the spreadsheets and that, because it's a very confusing, especially when you start talking about the financing and how that works and all of that. So it's something that we wanted to make sure was as open as possible, but it was a complex issue.
Thank you, Heather.
Counselor Johnson?
Yeah, to clarify some of the meetings, I attended the first meeting and I was unable to attend the second meeting. I think the mayor attended the second meeting. The information was straightforward. Gentlemen, there's a segment of people that do not want to pay this fee. And there's a segment of people that want this improvement. As the city facilitated that, we set it to a vote. Some people are not happy with the way the vote turned out, and those people were at these meetings. They were unhappy then, they're unhappy now, they're gonna be unhappy through the whole process because they didn't want to pay the fee. I think we've made the adjustments, we did the things that our role was to do. Our role was to give them the numbers, and it was their option to accept or deny that subdivision. And as a group, they accepted the subdivision. There was no advocating by the city. The numbers were given, the people were present. There's a segment that are happy, just like after every election. Some things don't go their way, but as a group, it passed. And now it's time to move forward with these things, and I would imagine we're gonna have a couple more public hearings. We're going to have resistance from a certain number of people through the process, and we need to keep in mind that the people in the subdivision voted for this. That was what we facilitated. That's what we promised we'd facilitate. And we gave them good, sturdy numbers. We told them that the finance would change the numbers, that we couldn't include the financing. The information was out there. If they didn't attend the meeting, or if they were closed-minded during the meeting, or they didn't want to hear the process, or they heard it different than what it was explained, I believe the city was straightforward. I believe the city did everything that they were supposed to do, and there were changes along the way, and I don't think anyone promised that there wouldn't be changes along the way. Everything was explained that it was a estimate. So everything you're hearing tonight is exactly what was pushed forward, and I believe everyone was mailed the information and given the information if they didn't show up to the meetings. So I would say that we're gonna get resistance through this process, and that's just the way this system works. They had the opportunity to vote, and this is the way it came out, and that's the way I look at it. I don't care. The improvement, I like the improvement. It's in my area. It's gonna upgrade my area. But if it would have failed, I would have been fine. And I didn't advocate one way or the other, and I don't believe the city did.
Thank you, Counselor Johnson. I too attended some of those meetings, and let's face it, some of these numbers are still just that. They're just estimates. We're not gonna know the actual numbers until we get further along in the process. I think that's important for us to realize, and it's important for the folks in the area to also realize that if they have these services at the present time, they're not gonna have to pay for duplication of services. I think that's where the real resistance came in. And it's unfortunate that sometimes the information doesn't get out there in a timely manner like it really should, but I think it will. And so to that end, I think this council is, we're determined to make sure that happens for the people that are going to get the improvements and the people that already have the improvements in a fair and timely manner. So it's really not until we send this thing out to bid that we're actually going to know what these costs are going to be. I mean, let's face it, the price of oil has gone through the floor. That means asphalt may be a little bit more affordable. It's hard to say. We don't know what's going to happen. But one of the questions that I had was evidently we're going to have underground electrical out there. Are we going to have? We're not going to have overhead electrical, are we?
Well, if we have electrical, it will be underground. That's one of the issues, is the initial guidance or the initial information was that it would be possible to run electrical in the same trenches that we were opening up, and turns out we're going to have to separately trench that. It may not be possible to bring in electrical under the cost. Actually, electrical, I think Pat can correct me, I think we're pretty confident that electrical can come in.
No, we're not sure. So, because we just need to make sure we're clear on this. When we did the construction, we did not have electrical built into those costs. So that is one of when we called the second public meeting, because when we found out that was not what the situation was going to be, and that it was estimated to be roughly around 50,000. If we had our worst case scenario with what our project cost estimates were, we couldn't cover that 50,000. If we have a best case scenario, we can cover that 50,000. So we needed to make sure that people understood that. It didn't change the limit of what they voted on. It's still the maximum of 650, but whether or not we can do electric and how much of it we can do will be based on when the bids come in and how much those other costs fall. It's our hope that we can do as much electric as possible because we want it to be as finished of a project as possible.
Exactly.
But it would be underground if we're doing it. At a minimum, though, if we don't have enough funds to install the electric, there's certain things we can do as retrenching for the other infrastructure that can reduce the electric cost at a future date. So we will definitely be doing those types of things.
Another issue that came up were the sidewalks. Some folks wanted the sidewalks included. I know that Pat was adamant about having the sidewalks included. Were the sidewalks included?
That was something that was removed. We did retain the ADA corners, but the sidewalk portion of the budget was removed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I make a comment on that sidewalks too, Mayor?
Councilor Rego, go right ahead.
Yeah, there was people there that are, where the houses already exist, and I was one that said, hey, if you got a vacant piece of property out there, why should we put a sidewalk? When you build a house, then you can put a sidewalk. But for the houses that exist, there's several houses that exist right now. They're going to just get just the curb and gutter. They're not going to get no sidewalks. Am I correct?
So as a reminder of how that discussion occurred, staff's initial recommendation was a 10% contingency, which was reduced to 6.5. We also, there's a small chance that there might be a lift station that's needed, but we really don't think there is. We went ahead and took the lift station out. And then I think the third item was the sidewalks that we had in there. The sidewalks amounts were removed. So the concern that we have from a staff perspective is there's a reason you do a 10% contingency. It's a standard for construction. There's times it can come in higher, there's times it comes in lower. So we've already reduced it down to 6.5. We've already taken the lift station out, and now we know we've got an additional potential 50,000 for the electric. So when the sidewalks are taken out, then the language was not, I don't think was even put in the ballot. Language as far as for sidewalks. So we can review the language again for the ballot, but there's some definite compression that is occurring now at this point in the budget. And so the money for the sidewalks were taken out. If it's something that council, it's okay with the ballot language and council wants us to put sidewalks in front of the houses that were completed, that would cut in then into some of the other parts of the project potentially.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Sidewalks are not okay with the ballot language.
Counselor Gillespie?
I'd just like to thank staff for all their work on this. I hope we've clarified some of the concerns that people had in that area. I think this is a good project. In the end, I think it will add value to that whole area, and houses will appreciate once development is finished, and I look forward to completion of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gillespie. And so with that, we'll move on to ordinance number 2015-1, authorizing construction of public improvements within the city of Alamosa, Special Improvement District 14-1, Carroll Subdivision Edition Number 2, and approving issuance of a preliminary order for the construction of such improvements in Special Improvement District 14-1.
There's no other
Eric-
questions, Mayor?
Well, I think Eric may have wanted to, no, sorry, Councilor Johnson. Councilor Johnson.
If there's no other questions or discussion, I move the council approves a preliminary order for the improvements within the SID and authorizes their construction.
I second.
I have a motion and a second on ordinance number 2015-1. Is there any further discussion on this ordinance?
Yes, Mayor, if I may.
Councilor Grego.
Is there going to be any consideration for, that we talked about, some of these designs and stuff put in there?
I think those, are you talking about the cost for the design? I think that's probably a more appropriate discussion when you guys do the actual assessments.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, start voting, council. I need one. Holly.
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, council. Next up, we'll move to the annexation petition on the Tucker-Wagner annexation. Pat, you carrying this one? Thank you.
Good evening, council. We're considering the annexation petition submitted for the Tucker-Wagner annexation. It's an enclave located between West 8th and West 7th Street, west of Washington Avenue, just north of the elementary school. We have approximately 14 existing enclaves in the city. When we can close those up, it helps with jurisdictional issues. It helps with utility provisions. It helps with a lot of different things. This property is already served by paved streets on the north and south side. It's a team effort from two different property owners. The property on the south side was provided with curb cuts and drive aprons during our West 8th Street project to try to avoid cutting a brand new street in 2 years to install those. The decision you make tonight is finding substantial completion of the petition. It doesn't, you'll see it 2 more times throughout the process. All you're doing is accepting the petition as complete and does not obligate you to ultimately annex the property whatsoever.
Thank you, Pat. Are there any questions of Pat?
I think the only other thing we wanted to clarify is in the communication to council, it talks about, I believe, the public hearing related to this. Is that date's no longer the 21st of January?
That's correct. That'll be changed. There's a longer public notice requirement that's mandated by the state, and the date for the public hearing in the resolution is incorrect. That'll be changed to it's your second meeting in February, I think.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Pat. You have any questions of Pat?
If not, Mayor, I'll go ahead and make the motion. We approve that application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on accepting the annexation petition for the Tuckner-Wagner annexation. Is there any further discussion?
Could you rephrase that motion as passing resolution number 2-2015, accepting the annexation?
I
petition?
stand corrected, Counselor.
With the change to the resolution of the date.
What is the date?
The resolution as presented to you presents a date for a public hearing at the meeting on the 21st day of January for determining eligibility, and that meeting will not be the 21st day of January. It will be instead February 18th.
Thank you, Counselor, for correcting me.
I've got a motion. Was a second? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
I've got a motion and a second that's clarified and changed. Is there any further discussion on resolution 2-2015? Seeing not, start voting, Council. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Council. Next up, we have committee reports. Does anyone have a committee report? Councilor Coleman.
All right, I have a community report from the San Luis Valley Development Resource Group. They will be hosting the Governor's Blueprint team on the morning of January the 16th. The discussion will include regional overviews, industry updates and trends, tourism overviews, and the conversation regarding updates to the San Luis Valley Blueprint. The San Luis Valley Development Resource Group is also working with ACID and Adams State University to do a feasibility study for a pilot training school in Alamosa, which is pretty good. And they also have been assisting as needed with updates to the Federal Aviation Administration on the certification of authorizing a round of the unmanned aircraft. So that's what I have on my report today.
Thank you, Ty. What day was that and what time was that on January 16th? You said?
It's the morning of January the 16th. I don't have a time.
Okay.
But I can get that information from the San Luis Valley Development Resource Group and send everyone an email.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Gillespie?
Yes, the golf board met December 18th, 2014. The board is trying to entice members to pay early in the year to bring more revenue into the club for the winter months to keep the bills paid. In doing this, hopefully the members will take advantage of the 5% discount for paying dues and the golf cart fees. As of December 15th, they had collected $15,000 in membership dues and golf cart fees. The Pro Shop has sold most of the merchandise in their showroom, and we'll have plenty of room for new merchandise this season, so that's good news. The restaurant had a very good holiday season with all the holiday parties, and the lunch crowds are increasing through December. That may have dropped off here in January, but they did have a New Year's Eve casino night, which I understand was very well received, and they have plans for a big Valentine's Day and a Fat Tuesday in March, and are even starting plans to bring a mystery murder dinner at the end of February. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gillespie. Is that it? We will then move on to staff announcements. Heather?
Do have a few miscellaneous updates for you. You've probably noticed around town we have our parks crews. They are out taking down the decorations. We're hoping that the little bit of the warming trend and the lack of wind will hold a bit longer to get those down. In regards to the Pink Elephant project, we had a meeting on Monday with the contractors and the county and ACID. It's going to take a few more weeks to get the last of the applications submitted. There's some coordination with CDOT in regards to their requirements during the actual demolition. It's anticipated that the actual part of tearing down the building might take around a week, but then removing the debris will take much longer. Because of the materials and the construction, they'll have to take it to the landfill near Dale North. So there's some travel time, fuel, some of those types of things. So the goal is to hopefully start seeing some work on that by the end of January, beginning of February. So Randy with ACID is trying to tie up the last of those loose ends and get this project moving. And as it does get closer to that, I think he's also going to do the appropriate press release to make sure the public's aware of it. We're going to do some door-to-door for the businesses that are nearby. And he's also going to make sure that people understand the donations and everything that come from the community to make this project a reality. A little update, Pat and I made a very quick trip to Littleton. The main focus of that trip was to look at their economic development software. As you might recall in our budget, we have $15,000 allocated towards Buxton. We looked at their software, which is actually an extension of the software we use for our GIS, which is Esri, and that's what we use for our GIS right now. If we were to purchase a few more modules, we could get almost the same exact information as what we're getting from Buxton for $3,000 to $4,000. So it was good to be able to see that, to feel comfortable moving away from Buxton because we've been using it for a while, and we want to make sure we still have the tools to be able to communicate what our community can offer for developers. So we will be making that change. Additionally, we were able to look at some of their apps that they use both to communicate information to citizens but then to collect information from citizens as well. And so we were able to better evaluate some of those apps that are being used by communities. With employees, we have this last week have been doing non-harassment, non-discrimination training, which was required for all employees. So they've been getting their update in that area. At the end of the week or early next week, we should have our annual report completed. Also from this, we'll be pulling some speaking points for the mayor on the state of the city. So we'll have that also connected to the website and can be available for anyone who wants to view what we did in 2014. Pat is still looking at the glass crusher, and we are set to do that for 2015. He has been very much focused on looking for grants to see if we can reduce that cost and free up some money for maybe some other projects, and he may have a lead. So I wanted to give some kudos to Pat for looking for some ways to offset some of those costs. Lastly, Pat next week has a meeting with CDOT. When we had that accident with 160 and the Washington Avenue crossing, there was concern from the community and I think from council to look to see if there's something we should do there. So Pat does have a meeting with CDOT next week to take a look at that. They will also then be discussing the Pink project while they're in town and what they're going to require and make sure we're facilitating that. And then lastly, Michaela is back in the office, if you hadn't called recently. She started back on Monday after being off for 8 weeks, and so if you haven't said hello to her, feel free to give her a call or stop in.
Thank you, Heather. Anyone else? Jim, do you have anything to say about your new website? It's just beautiful. I mean, Charlie thinks it's confusing. I think it's great. Chief, you got anything?
I forgot the chiefs for Robert Jackson. We do have his retirement reception, which is this Friday at 3 p.m. till 5 p.m. here in the council chambers. So Robert's worked over 30 years with the city. He's, I guess we can say, moving on to bigger, I don't know if it's better things, it's the county, so I don't know. But he's moving on in his career, and he's going to help, and we'll have a great relationship. But we need to send him off in style, and that's what we're going to be doing Friday.
Thank you, Heather. Heinz, do you have anything to say about the skating rink? Not yet? Okay, anybody else out there? All right. Well, thank you, staff, for that. We appreciate everything you do for us, and we'll bring it back to council for council comment. Counselor Gillespie.
I'd just like to thank Robert Jackson for his 31 years of service to the city of Alamosa. He's done a great job and wish him the best. Thank you.
Counselor Vigil.
Yes, I'd like to echo the mayor's thoughts on the new website. I think it's beautiful. I think it's very user-friendly. Really appreciate that. And I'd also like to call to attention to the council and Heather and maybe Pat that I've been getting some calls about 3rd Street and driving north and south on the different roads along 3rd Street and how it's kind of dangerous and how you have to kind of creep forward to look to see if there's any cars coming with obstructions by maybe trees and cars that are parked pretty close to the intersection. So I'm wondering if maybe you guys could look at that and see if we can figure something out with that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Counselor Coleman.
Okay, my comment is to Jim. Great job on that website, my friend. I think we're headed in the right direction with that website. And there's a lot of information on there already. And from talking with Heather, there's a lot of room to grow and other information that we can add that's going to make information more accessible to the citizens so that they can have the information as they need it when they need it. So I think you've done a great job so far. Keep it up, my friend.
Counselor Johnson.
Echo what Greg said. Captain Jackson served us for 31 years, a great person. I'm happy he's with the county. I think we'll get a little better city-county cooperation going. Extremely excited for him and thank him for his years of service. Got to give Jim a plug too, everybody else is. I got to play with it the other day. I was a bit confused, but it has a real quick link for guys that can't, a little bit behind to help me link, and it worked pretty good. Very user-friendly. I enjoyed navigating the site. In about half hour, I'm almost a pro now. So it looks great. Good job. A lot of information there, and I love it. Thanks a lot for all the work, and you too, Jose.
Absolutely. I don't think I could really add to that. I mean, staff has just set us out on a 2015 that is exemplary. We appreciate that, and it's just great to have you folks out here working on behalf of our citizens. So, with that,
Mayor,
yes,
something just came up to me. I was trying to sign these birthday deals. This deal on the retreat, this mini retreat, I think if we start breaking that down into work sessions, it's going to take away from the whole purpose of having retreats. I think we need to set it a day, and those who come, and those who can't come, get the information later. But I think it's very important that we have a retreat instead of having a work session, and that's personally from having those retreats for the past 30 years. They're really, really a good time to get together and really discuss something. When you start taking them apart and talking about a section here and then talking about another section here next 3 weeks, it takes away from the whole thing. And I think we should really look at it and put together a date and let's have a day retreat, a full day Saturday retreat Sunday before the main one. But I think personally we should go ahead and have something like that instead of a work session.
Thank you, Councilor Grego. I'm basically in favor of having a work session specific to a specific subject. If all of us could be there to weigh in on the subject that we want to discuss. I don't think we really want to take it apart. I think for the benefit of everyone being present, a work session with maybe just one subject would be probably the best way to approach it. I do know, and I do think that a retreat is in all our best interest. But if we have one or two missing, then I think we're lacking in some of the information that could be brought forward, on a specific subject. So I don't know. Anybody else want to weigh in on that at this point?
One more comment, Mayor, along that line. When we take these positions and we know what we're supposed to be doing, what the meetings we're going to go to. when we take these positions as council people, we should find a way to put it in our schedules to make sure that we know that these are gonna happen, the retreats. You know, and I know that sometimes it's hard to attend everything, but missing it once, maybe even twice, but it's very, very important. That's the most important thing. These retreats pretty much set your budget, gives your staff direction on a lot of different things. And it's so important, you know, and when you start, you know, we need to, and how do I say this? We need to remind ourselves that we took these positions and we are responsible to make sure that we make it to these retreats so that we can continue moving this community forward. Thank you.
I totally respect your position, Councilor Grego. In the interest of accommodating all the information that we can get and in a timely manner, and let's face it, we haven't had work sessions here in quite a while. And sometimes our agendas are light, and a work session, half-hour work session or an hour work session really won't hurt anything. We'll have an opportunity to discuss something, and if we need a different work session or another work session, we can go ahead and do that. I like work sessions. I think they're very informative. It gives everybody an opportunity to participate, and I don't see anything wrong with that. So with that, we've got a need for an executive session this evening. Council?
Mr. Mayor, I will move that we move to executive session pursuant to CRS State Statute 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses F, to discuss personnel matters related to employees of the clerk and recorder's office.
I second.
I have a motion and a second on our executive session. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, start voting, please. Holly?
The motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. And for those members in the audience, we will be going into executive session. After our executive session is over, we will go into regular session and no further business will be discussed. Thank you.